All right, gentlemen, we are rolling. I'd like to welcome special guests to the Andres Segovia show. Gentlemen, by all means, let my audience know who you are and what do you do.
Well, thank you for having us, Andres. My name is Matthew Monforton. I'm an attorney in Bozeman, Montana, and my client is with me today. His name is Pastor Brandon Huber, and he is the pastor of the Clinton Community Church in Clinton, Montana.
Well, the reason I asked you, gentlemen, to come on is because there's a particular story that is garnering national attention. And by the time as I mentioned in the pre-interview, that this goes up, there'll be a lot more people talking about it. And I believe there's a lot at stake here. So I wanted to quickly ask, with respects to why this is a national attention, and it's with respects to a lawsuit that was filed. I don't know when it was filed, but I do know that as of recently, the National Association of Realtors was added as a defendant to this lawsuit. Am I correct in those details?
That's exactly right. We filed our original complaint on November 3rd, and we named the Missoula Organization of Realtors as the original defendant. A couple weeks ago, we filed an amended complaint in which we added the National Association of Realtors. And I think probably the easiest way to explain our legal situation is to start with the factual situation. And that's where I think Pastor Brandon will be able to fill everyone in.
Correct. Because what exactly is the lawsuit regarding?
It's with regard to an ethics hearing that the Missoula Organization of Realtors, which is a local affiliate of the National Association of Realtors, it's an ethics hearing that MOR is forcing Pastor Huber to endure. Pastor
Hmm.
Huber not only is a pastor in his church, but he's also a part-time realtor. And he has run afoul of what is referred to as the hate speech prohibition that the National Association of Realtors enacted, I believe it was in November of 2020.
Hmm.
And I'll let Pastor Brandon talk about the hate, supposedly, that he is engaged in that got him into this situation, and why we responded with a lawsuit against these realtor organizations.
Understood. And I think that's a good time to bring you in, Pastor. So to get to the bottom of this, your attorney just chimed in on that, and that's with respects to, I believe it's Article 10, specifically 5 of the Code of Ethics that was voted on by the National Association of Realtors in mid-November 2020. How I know is because I too am a realtor as of this recording, but by the time it airs, I will no longer be a member of the association. I'm in California, my local chapter, my state, and my national. I am bidding them adieu. Uh, and it was when I live streamed at the time, I got the announcement was with respects to situations that you found yourself in that I, among other people, were warning would happen. So that's why I invited you on because it's a case that um, you're not taking this line down, basically. So you're pushing back. So to get to the bottom of this, and we'll eventually, I guess, talk about the this code of ethics thing. Um, please tell us, how did this all get started?
Well, our church, I'm just going to kind of give a background if you're okay with that. Our church partnered with the Missoula Food Bank for the past 3 years. And what we've done is during the summertime, we've done a kids eat free lunch program. And during that program, we would go down into the city of Missoula and pick up the lunches that we would hand out to the community from the Missoula Food Bank, bring them out to our community in Clinton, and then we would hand those lunches out on a daily basis. And we've done that for the last 3 years. The 2 years prior, we haven't had any issues. There's been no propaganda placed in the lunch. And then June of this year, we had some volunteers working the lunch program, and I received a picture that had pride propaganda in it. And so I had called a meeting with our church board. I talked with my wife, who was spearheading the lunch program for the last 3 years. And based off of the material that they put in those lunches that we handed out to members of the community, we decided to end our partnership with the Missoula Food Bank for that purpose.
Okay. So what does this have to do with real estate?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay. Because as soon as you pulled out, um, how did how did people get wind of this? Someone must have taken issue because someone filed a complaint.
So what ended up happening is between myself, my wife, and the Missoula Food Bank, we had conversations back and forth trying to figure out, was it an accident? Was it intentional? Did somebody slip it in there? Because, as a church, and knowing what churches stand for, or most churches in today's age, we felt it would have been appropriate for the Missoula Food Bank to reach out to us and say, hey, we're going to include this flyer in the lunches today. Are you cool with that? Or giving us the opportunity to take them out because we are a church. And that was never presented to us. So we felt that they were snuck into the lunches. We weren't told about it. And then we handed them out. And what ended up happening is upon the church board meeting and agreeing unanimously to end our partnership with the Missoula Food Bank, I had written a statement from the church letting our church members know, letting our community know, one, that we were sorry because we didn't know who received the lunches that day. And we had a mom call and say, well, you're lucky I found them before my husband did, because they were upset that those flyers were placed in the lunches. And so I had written a statement to the community, to our church, stating what transpired and what we were going to do from that point forward. And I just sent out a newsletter yesterday, and I emailed a copy of that over to you. And I can also email you a copy of the statement that was put out, because in the statement that was put out to the community, I'm not sure where the outrage came from. I'm not sure where the uproar came from, because in that statement, there is nothing about discrimination. There's nothing about hate speech. You will find nothing in that statement.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I was doing some research looking for a copy of that statement that outraged the community, apparently. And well, that's at least what the news was saying. So I couldn't find a copy of it. So I'm glad you volunteered it before I asked you for it, because I would like to include it in the show notes for people to see for themselves. And also, I think I did see an email pop up as I was setting up here. So we're gonna touch on that as well. You mentioned something that this statement came after the fact. So apparently some lunches were already being distributed when you were made aware of that decision. So it's not like it was something that was told to you that in the month of June they were going to be including Pride Month. I guess you call it propaganda. I guess it's that they were partnering up and making, I guess, celebrating Pride Month, because that's what a lot of companies tend to do to, for lack of a better expression, is virtue signal. So, like you mentioned, this wasn't discussed or brought up to you. So, by when did you find out? Like it's now June. So, by when did you find out that these were included in the lunches?
So I believe, and I could be wrong on my date, so don't quote me on this. I believe it was the last Monday in June is when that flyer was placed into the lunches. And after our volunteers completed their time that day, if there was any lunches left over, it was a child that took a picture and sent it to me that was helping us that day, a teenager. And so I told her, I said, if you guys want to have a lunch, go ahead and have a lunch. And she had opened up that lunch, and in there she had found that flyer and taken a picture of it and sent it to me. That was the first time in 3 years that the Missoula Food Bank has ever done this.
Interesting. And you mentioned that it has been a partnership for several years now. And you say when you found out, that's when you had a meeting with you said your wife, and then talked to the church council and among others to make a decision to stop your or end your partnership with the food bank?
Well, originally, so what transpired is I called my wife and I said, "Here's what happened." I said, "I want you to reach out to the food bank because I want to know if this was an accident." Like I said, did they know? Was it intentional? And so she was in the process of reaching out to them. I reached out to the board chairman for our church. We all got together, and ultimately, um, there was no hostility between the Missoula Food Bank and Clinton Community Church. It was a agree to disagree moment, and we just decided at that time that we were going to end our partnership with the food bank, and that our church was going to continue to hand out food to the community as promised for the rest of that summer. So our partnership ended on July 2nd, and starting July 5th, our church made the lunches every day and continued to hand out the lunches to our community. And between the July 5th and August 20th, I believe we handed out about 628 lunches.
So essentially, the aggrieved party here are members of the community that find themselves on the opposite side of supporting Pride Month. In other words, those that don't believe in that expression, that flies in the face of their religious beliefs. So they were the ones that were technically hurt in a sense in all this, because you kept up your commitment to continue handing out lunches, basically.
Correct.
So okay, and I'm gonna try to be as professional as possible about all this, because this is the kind of stuff that I warned about on my program. But the ones that filed the complaint were not harmed in all this.
Correct. The lady who filed the complaint against me with the Missoula Organization of Realtors has never been a part of our church and has never been a realtor client or a real estate client of mine. And she was offended, I guess, by the statement that we put out that I will email to you, like I said, and filed the complaint with the Missoula Organization of Realtors. And even in her complaint, she says, although I cannot find, and this isn't word for word, I don't have it in front of me, but she talks about, although I cannot find an area of hate speech within anything that she's read or seen, she still filed the complaint with the Missoula Organization of Realtors.
I got wind of this story on November 30th. There's, for those of us that are realtors, we might get email blasts from an agency called Res Media, and they highlight real estate stories. So that's how I first was made aware of this. That was November 30th. This issue happened back in July. And the reason it was getting some traction is because, as I recall, December 2nd was the ethics hearing in front of the National Association of Realtors. Was that right?
It's in front of the Missoula Organization of Realtors. It's in front of our local chapter.
So it's in front of the local chapter. But the NAR was in some way, somehow involved.
So I don't know, Matthew, do you want to talk about how we brought NAR involved into the complaint?
Sure, I'll go ahead and chime in on that part. The Missoula Organization of Realtors, shortly after we filed our original complaint on November 3rd, they said, oh, don't worry, we're going to hold off. We're going to hold on the ethics hearing in abeyance until the lawsuit is complete. So that ethics hearing is still hanging over Pastor Brandon. It hasn't happened yet. But in the meantime, we discovered some very interesting statements that the National Association of Realtors made with regard to their rule. Specifically, their Professional Standards Committee met in May of 2021. And that was one of the main topics of discussion in that conference was, how do we apply this rule? How do we apply it to people who are of faith? And one of the questions that came up was, well, what happens if someone's in a church, a pastor in a church, reading scriptures that the LGBTQ community might community might find offensive? And the answer was that's a violation of the NAR's new ethics rule, that doesn't matter whether you're acting as a realtor or not. Under this new rule, you have no private life. You are subject to this rule 24/7. And if you do anything that offends the LGBTQ community or any member thereof, you have violated their ethics rule. And violations include reciting Bible verses. And so when we discovered that, we decided, well, we're going to add the National Association of Realtors, because they're the ones that are promulgating this ethics code, this so-called ethics code. They're the ones that are requiring all local chapters throughout the nation to follow it and to enforce it, on pain of being expelled if they fail to do so. So, and not only have they promulgated this code and are enforcing it, they are interpreting it in a way that is clearly religiously bigoted. And the end game here is to purge Bible-believing Christians from the real estate industry.
Well, and that's kind of what you're getting at, because the ethics hearing, if it doesn't go your way, what are they? I know the answer, but my audience perhaps doesn't. So what are they trying? But with the whole complaint being asked, what is the punishment for this heinous crime? Apparently,
the punishment can be anything from a fine that could be up to $5,000 all the way up to suspension or expulsion from the Missoula Organization of Realtors. And what that entails is a denial of access to the MLS system, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with. And they'll understand that even though Pastor Brandon has his license from the state and will continue to have that, without having access to MLS, he's pretty much dead in the water as a realtor. And this is his only choice is to cave in and say, I'm never going to preach God's word anymore. I'm never going to recite the Bible, or continue to be a pastor and face this ethics hearing, and then the next ethics complaint that follows that, the next time he says something from the Bible that offends someone. So this is clearly it's going to end up being the death penalty for realtors like Pastor Brandon, who aren't inclined to compromise on their principles and on their biblical beliefs.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate that these kind of events are happening, and those quotes that are being unearthed about the NER. I'll be following this lawsuit very closely, for which is why it's garnering so much attention. There was another case that happened just prior to Pastor Huber's situation with I believe it was Minnesota, with a realtor named Matt Moore, who was a member of the LGBTQ community until he got a conversion and came to Christ, got married with his wife, and ultimately posted about his testimony on Facebook. That's when his managing broker told him he can't because he'd be in violation of this. He ended up letting his license expire. As I try to pull up more information, because I'm covering it on my program now to highlight issues like this, I know that he was trying to get NAR also to void this in some way, but with his website being gone, I can only imagine that the financial cost that comes at trying to mount a fight like this is it's astronomical. Attorneys are not cheap. So I know that very well. And and I'll ask this to the pastor, Pastor Huber, how has this affected your real estate business?
It's hard to say. Because I was a part-time realtor, I know that there are people that are refusing to work with me because of my stance. But I haven't heard a whole lot of that. You just know that there's the quiet few. I'm continuing to move forward. I'm going to continue to serve the Missoula area, the Clinton area. Windermere Corporate has made a statement saying, although we don't agree with Pastor Brandon, or he may not agree with our stance, we would welcome his resignation from the Windermere name. Again, that's not word for word, but Windermere has tried to passive aggressively get me to step down, which I'm not going to do. I still to this day claim I haven't done nothing wrong. I didn't say nothing wrong. There's no hate speech. There's no discrimination. Therefore, I don't feel that my license should be in jeopardy, and I'm going to continue to serve my clients with the way that I have ever since I got into real estate, and that's where we're at.
And why did you get into real estate?
Well, my real estate background, my grandparents were in real estate. They started an office back in Washington in 1969, I believe. So real estate's been in my blood. I watched my grandpa do it. I watched my grandma do it. I got in the real estate industry in 2009, working as a customer service rep for a title and escrow company. And then my wife and my family and I, we moved to where our family's real estate office was, and that's when I actually got into real estate, was in 2011. And that year I won Rookie of the Year. To answer your question, why I got into real estate, because I love helping people either or buy or sell their home, finding their dream, helping them achieve their dream of home ownership. It's a big step in life. It's something that people look forward to. You have those goals that you want to reach in life, and buying a home is one of them. And I love seeing the satisfaction on my buyers or my sellers' faces at the end of a transaction. It brings me joy to help people.
And when it comes to helping people, did you have a proclivity or a bias towards a certain group, or you welcomed all?
I welcomed all. I wouldn't know, to be honest with you. Since I got into the real estate industry in 2009, I couldn't tell you if I have or have not helped a member of any community, because it's not part of my questioning. If you choose to have a different lifestyle or go a different walk than I do, that's your choice in life. I have nothing to do with it. My job is to help you either buy or sell your home.
And with all that all this attention that this is getting, and it will continue to get, because this is like a snowball. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. How has this affected your church?
The church continues to stand behind me. We went into this together, and we're standing together. Now that, not to say that there are a few people that may not fully agree with the stance of the church, and that's okay. They have the right to their own opinion. But as far as the church goes, God's placed a calling on our lives and on the churches. He's placed a calling on the church, and we are going to move forward. We're not going to let this hold us back, because we still have to fulfill what God's placed on our life.
So people are going to hear it's that you're a part-time real estate realtor, and you don't know how much this may or may not have affected your business, which means it's not perhaps the main source of your income. So wouldn't it be easier to just like, all right, I'll up and leave, and we agree to disagree, I'll go my own way? Why is this so important to you to stay in the fight?
Real estate's, I love selling real estate. I love being involved in real estate. Like I said before, I love helping people. I feel honestly that if I were to say, okay, we're done, I'm going to go my own separate way, you win. It's exactly that. They win. And I have gotten so much support. I have had so many realtors reach out to me and say, Brandon, keep fighting this fight, because you're not fighting for yourself. You are fighting for every single realtor that's involved under the NAR at this time. And if I walked away right now, I'd walk away from everybody who has stood with me, who supported me. And honestly, if God's put me in this situation right now to use me to help others and change this code, I have to fulfill that calling that God's placed on my life.
And I guess I might throw this over to Matthew. So with the lawsuit itself, I believe it's calling to void that hate speech clause, which is Article 10, I think 5 of the code of ethics? Is that what the end game of the lawsuit is?
Exactly, and it's what they call standard procedure 10-5, I think. And yeah, and that's exactly what we're asking. We're not asking for monetary damages. We're asking for a court order declaring this provision to be illegal under Montana law. There's a Montana provision that specifically prohibits discrimination based on either race or religion or gender with regard to not only housing, but also with regard to brokerages and access to MLS systems or MLS networks. And that statute fits like a T to this case. And it's exactly what NAR and MOR are threatening to violate. Just having the ethics hearing in and of itself, without regard to what the outcome is an interference with Pastor Brandon's right to practice his profession, irrespective of his religion. The fact that they're forcing him to basically hire an attorney and defend himself in an ethics hearing based on an innocuous letter that he wrote to his congregation is absolutely outrageous. And we're asking a court to put a stop to it.
Yep. And I for those that are outside of the realtor world, there's real estate professionals. You can be a licensee or a broker. That doesn't automatically make you a realtor. You have to be a union paying member to use the trademark realtor within the name. That's usually paid to a local chapter, which bundles in the state and the nationwide. But it's unlike I guess federal law, where they put something in there. And well, it kind of starts that way, where it trickles on down. NAR sets basically the rules for the code of conduct for the realtors, but it was always up until November 2020. It was always within the workplace, if you will, and everything that I heard here has been the very thing that others like me have been highlighting, that this would happen. These questions were brought up to the NAR in as they were debating this, and this is and in the case of California, where I find myself in, and there were these meetings with the local chapter and then the state with attorneys and this and that, and everybody said, you don't have to worry about this, it's not going to get that far, there's safeguards to make sure it doesn't go that way. Montana doesn't strike me as the blue state that California is, and that's why I'm actually more surprised that this is happening from over there, because I want to know how many more cases have been here in California that we're probably not even hearing about.
Exactly.
The fact that real estate had nothing to do with anything you were doing is what should be a highlight of that other people should be taken away from this case. It's like there was no real estate involved, and technically, from what I've been hearing, and as I'm learning too, and reading in the news and all that, the party that was actually took immediate offense to this was the community that did not see eye to eye or support or believe in the LGBTQ agenda. And they were the ones that were harmed. But last I checked, has any member that was offended filed a lawsuit against the Food Alliance or any LGBTQ organization for offending them?
And the answer is no, because the members of Pastor Brandon's congregation are not woke. They're not snowflakes. They're not offended by every little thing that comes their way. They saw this pride flyer, and rather than make a big deal about it, they decided we're just going to quietly walk away from our partnership with the Missoula Food Bank. And if it hadn't been for this idiotic complaint that was later filed by someone who was not even a member of Pastor Brandon's church, no one would have heard about this. In many ways, that all of these facts that you've talked about makes this the perfect test case for NAR with regard to their new ethics code, because if they can succeed here, they can succeed anywhere. Because what you have here is a pastor who has said nothing derogatory, nothing offensive, certainly nothing that qualifies as hate speech, given any reasonable definition. It's occurring, as you say, in a red state. if they can nail someone like Pastor Brandon under these circumstances, they can go after anyone successfully. And everyone knows that. That's why this is such an important case. It'd be one thing to bring this kind of a case in Seattle or San Francisco or Portland, places where you would, as you say, you would expect this kind of case to be brought. But they've chosen to do this in Montana. And I think I think it's deliberate. I think it's to show realtors throughout the country that you're not safe no matter where you're at. No matter how red the area is, we're going to come after you if you violate this rule. And this rule is, if you're a Bible believing Christian, you had better keep your mouth shut, or you're not going to be in the real estate business.
And that's kind of that was another follow-up question in a way to ask. So Pastor Huber, let me ask you this: you do feel that the Bible's the one on trial here?
Absolutely. I mean, Jesus told us that we'd be persecuted, and for people to look at, there was nothing that was said in the statement that was put out. So where does the hate speech come in? We don't know. Where does discrimination come in? We don't know, because we continue to do and fulfill what we said we were going to do. The only thing that we can see at this point is, as my attorney Matthew Monforton has said all along, is the Bible considered hate speech? Well, NAR answered that question when they said that religion is no safe harbor. They answered that question when one of the members of the committee said that you could be in violation for quoting the Bible word for word. So is the Bible under trial? Yeah, it is. Is the Bible going to stand true? Absolutely. Is it going to prevail? You bet it will.
I have to let you have a moment to respond to some of your critics, because as I was researching this before speaking with you, I only first heard your name, as I mentioned, back on November 30th on a news article. I never saw anything follow up, because I was curious what happened at the ethics hearing. As your attorney mentioned, that hasn't actually happened yet. So I'm like, okay, so it was pushed out. Hence, I didn't see a follow up to that story until I heard that there was a change to the lawsuit where the NAR was added as a defendant. But from some of the clippings, the news clippings that I've seen, I believe they're members of the LGBTQ plus community that have come out and said that they called you a bigot and that you deserve everything that's coming at you. How do you respond to that criticism?
They have the right to their own opinion. They are going based off of false truths, information that the media has put out there that is not accurate. They are not doing their own research to find the truth. So, if they want to call me a bigot, that's on them. I'm not into name calling. I'm not the kind of person that's going to come back and counterattack you. If that's the path that you want to take, so be it. I'm going to take the high road. I'm going to stick to the truth. I'm going to stick to the story, and I'll let you guys make your own opinions based off of what the media chooses to put out there.
And what then? Because we heard your personal story with respects to how you became a real estate professional and what your intentions were to help others along the way. Does that carry over to the church? What is the since I believe you recently became pastor or elected pastor of this church this year, if I'm not mistaken?
Correct. Back in 2019, I was elected by the congregation as an associate pastor. And then in February of 2021, my wife and I took over as lead pastor of the church.
And what is the church's mission statement?
That's a good question. It's a long one. The mission of the church is to go and create disciples, as we're called to do, and to fulfill Jesus's love in everything we do, and to be involved with the community and to help out the best that we can.
Okay, that sounds inclusive to me. So I guess that's where the question lies. That I was trying to pry. I'm like, okay, so if it's not the church, where was he spewing this hate speech? And it does seem to me that it probably is that the Bible's the one on trial here. You mentioned that you feel that this was a setup. this whole thing that just came across as a setup. What makes you think that? Can you speak to that?
I think Matthew was the one that said that it was a setup, so I would let him answer that question.
Here's my answer to the question so far. We're in litigation, so I can't go into a whole lot of detail. But
Understood.
From what we know of the individual who filed this ethics complaint, she's not a lawyer. She's not a real estate expert. She has no reason to have knowledge of what the National Association of Realtors enacted in November of 2020 with regard to this so-called hate speech prohibition. Someone told her about this. Someone said, "Hey, here's a great way to embarrass and maybe drive out Pastor Brandon from the real estate industry." I'm pretty sure that's what we're going to find, and we plan on issuing subpoenas for records. We've already done that. We're planning on setting up a deposition of this individual and asking her directly how she got involved, who told her about the rule. She didn't find out by researching on the internet, oh, here's this new rule and here's how I file a complaint. Someone was helping her, probably several people, and we're going to get to the bottom of who that was.
Yeah, and I really hope you do, for the sake of other realtors that find themselves in that same position, and some that have found themselves in that same position. I have not confronted that per se myself here in the state, but I have come across as very strong against the California Association of Realtors for how they've been disservicing both their members and the constituents, which is the California resident that we're supposed to be servicing, because all they've done is just more and more harm to its members and the community at large. And that's. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The reality is, Pastor Brandon is probably not the first Christian to run afoul of this ethics rule. The problem is all of these ethics hearings are supposed to be kept confidential, and I suspect for the people that have run afoul of this rule, they've caved in. And I'm not passing judgment on them. Many realtors are full-time realtors, and that's how they pay their mortgage. That's how they feed their family. Fortunately, Pastor Brandon is in a situation where, although the extra money from being a realtor is helpful, he's not starving without it. He's not going to lose his house next week or next month if he's not a realtor. And so that puts him in a unique position to be able to say, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to stand up to this. And because he was willing to do that, because he was willing to file a lawsuit, that enables us to talk about what would normally be a confidential proceeding. It's basically a star chamber that the realtors put you through if you're in Pastor Brandon's situation. You've had this bogus complaint filed against you. You're not allowed to say anything about it. And if you get convicted, you're pretty much out of the real estate business. The fact that we filed a lawsuit, that Pastor Brandon was courageous enough to do that and stick with it, is the only reason we're able to talk about this with you and with other folks. And that's why that's part of Pastor Brandon's motivation is to keep talking for the people for whom it's much more difficult to fight against the NAR.
Yeah, and again, I'll be following with great interest to see how the story continues to play out, because 2022 should be pretty big with respects to all this. And I don't think I have any more questions with respects to all this, and I think something was answered just a bit. But if people were interested in supporting the cause, if you will, is there a website or some way somehow for them to keep in touch with any of you to follow and get updates about this story, or if they want to donate to the mission that is keeping their rights as realtors and as Christ believers? Is there anything of that sort yet, or we're not there yet?
Well, thank you for asking. Pastor Brandon has set up through his church a legal defense fund. So, and I'll let him give more the contact information. The easiest way to to get in touch with him is to go onto Facebook, type in Clinton Community Church. It'll take you to their Facebook page, and there's information there on where to send any contributions that anyone may feel led to give. And also, not just that, but just words of support. Pastor Brandon and his family are under siege. His church has stood with him, but he's in an area of Montana that, while Montana is quite red for the most part, the Missoula area where he lives is not. And so just having that support, just having people randomly call in or throughout the country and say, hey, we're praying for you, we're standing with you, it means a lot. It means a lot to Pastor Brandon and his family. If people can do that, that would be wonderful. And there's more of a long-term strategy. The realtors that are listening to your show need to understand that what is happening to Pastor Brandon today, if they are people of faith, they're going to be next on the list. If you're not only if you're a Bible-believing Christian, but if you're a devout Mormon, devout Catholic, if you're Orthodox Jew, if you're Muslim, and you take your faith seriously, all of these people are going to be next on the list. And so this is not just Pastor Brandon's fight. This is something that all realtors who have religious faith and take that faith seriously need to be concerned about and need to be fighting. And one of the things they can do is they can send a message to NAR's incoming president, a man, I believe his name is Parcell. And I don't know if that's me doing that or not. But Mr. Parcell is the incoming president of NAR. He is, as I understand it, a devout Mormon. He did a 2-year mission for the Mormon Church years back. He played ball for BYU. I want to ask Mr. Parcell what portions of Scripture are off limits. What portion, and if you're a Mormon, what portions of Mormon scriptures are off limits? And does he intend to abide by that? That's something that I think realtors deserve to know, and they ought to be asking him that question.
Pastor Huber?
I want to thank you, Andreas, for having us on here, and thank you for the support. Anybody that's watching, thank you for the prayers. Most importantly, I've said it all along, as Matthew said, we're not in this for monetary reasons. When people get involved in court cases and lawsuits, there's money attached. And for ours, there is no money attached. This is to give Christians a backbone, to give people a backbone to stand up from these corporations being able to bully you into what they feel needs to be the next woke agenda. For supporting us financially, you can go to clintoncommunitychurch.com, and there's a giving tab. You can click on that and mark it as the Legal Defense Fund. Also below the giving tab, it has our P.O. box for the church if you want to send a check through the mail. I'm just in the process of setting up, as I said, that newsletter that I emailed to you just prior to coming on here. You can share that with your followers, and they can subscribe to that newsletter. And then also on Facebook, if they go and search Pastor Brandon Huber, they can follow me on there where I will continue to post news articles that are posted and keep people as best as I can up to date through that as well.
And for my listeners and viewers alike, the MO. Any and all references mentioned here and social media links will be available to show notes accompany this episode at www.thenewsglobe.com, so you can find everything there. Gentlemen, we're going to wrap it here, but by all means, please stay on the line, and we'll wrap it up then. But I do appreciate that you've come on the program to be able to tell your side of the story, which I believe is going to be much more important heading into this new year, 2022.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.